Ambassador for Climate Action, Ravi Menon, distinguished guests, good morning, and thank you all for coming for the launch of this year's Singapore Pavilion. I'm Kai Tian from the Ministry of Sustainability and the Environment, and I'll be your MC for today. We have an exciting lineup for our launch event. We'll start off with a welcome video by Minister of Sustainability and the Environment and Minister in charge of Trade Relations, Grace Fu, followed by opening remarks by Ambassador for Climate Action, Ravi Menon. After that, Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Bhutan, His Excellency Chairing Topgay, will deliver a keynote speech before we move into a panel discussion on building the global architecture for carbon markets. Without further ado, let's begin with Minister's welcome video.
Dear friends, salam, and a warm welcome to our Singapore Pavilion at COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan. This year, our theme for the Pavilion is realizing our shared climate vision together. Every year, we gather at COP to discuss how the world must collaborate to realize our collective climate ambitions. The decisions and choices we make today will shape the future for many generations to come. This year, the COP29 presidency has set a vision anchored on two key pillars: enhancing ambition and enabling action. These two pillars are essential to achieving our collective climate goals. The inaugural global stocktake at COP28 last year gave us clear direction. While the world has made progress since Paris Agreement, our efforts thus far are insufficient to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees C. The global stocktake has set out clear actions to keep this goal within reach. It called for the world to transition away from fossil fuels, to triple the world's renewable energy capacity and double global energy efficiency by 2030. It highlighted the need to accelerate the deployment of zero and low emission technologies. Singapore is committed to do our part despite being an energy disadvantaged city-state. In 2022, we announced our ambition to achieve net zero emissions by 2050 and to reduce emissions to around 60 million tons CO2e in 2030 after peaking emissions earlier as part of our revised 2030 NDC. Our climate ambition is backed by a whole-of-nation Singapore Green Plan that charts out concrete actions and targets. They include increasing our solar energy capacity to at least 2 gigawatt peak by 2030, greening at least 80% of our buildings by 2030, and raising our clean energy imports to around 6 gigawatts by 2035. We have made good progress on these initiatives. These are captured in our inaugural biannual transparency report and national inventory report, which we have recently submitted to the United Nations. The BTR, which has higher reporting standards, strengthens accountability and builds trust in global efforts to advance towards our shared climate goals. We call on all parties to submit the BTR as required under the Paris Agreement's Enhanced Transparency Framework before the end of 2024. Second, enabling action. As a financial hub, Singapore is doubling our efforts to mobilize financing to support the global climate action. Last year, we launched the Financing Asia's Transition Partnership, or FAST-P, which aims to mobilize up to $5 billion to de-risk and finance green and transition projects in Asia. This year, I am pleased to announce that the Singapore government will pledge up to $500 million as concessional capital to match dollar for dollar other concessional capital from partners. This combined pool of concessional capital will be used to crowd in commercial capital and other sources of finance to accelerate capital flows to support Asia's green transition. More on the progress of FAST-P will be announced over the next few days. Carbon markets are another important mechanism to unlock financial flows for energy transition projects. We have lined up a series of in-depth discussions with industry practitioners to examine how we can catalyze this mode of financing and support the implementation of Article 6. In the coming days, we will bring together stakeholders to discuss these topics and many others, including energy transition, cities, youth, food and water, here at the Pavilion. Leading experts, thought leaders will inspire us through panel discussions and showcases of bold and innovative solutions. Our youth will share their aspirations, perspectives, and actions through youth-led programs. Agreements and deals will be made at the Pavilion through MOU signings and launches by the Singapore government, corporates, and NGOs. We look forward to welcoming you either in person at this cozy space or virtually through our Pavilion's website. We hope that our programs will inspire you to act and to partner us in one of our many endeavors. Please join us in building new friendships, partnerships, and collaborations on climate action. Thank you once again for supporting our COP29 Singapore Pavilion.
Thank you, Minister Grace Fu, for highlighting Singapore's commitment to accelerating collective climate action and the importance of partnerships. We certainly cannot solve climate change alone. Next, it is my pleasure to invite Ambassador for Climate Action, Ravi Menon, on stage to deliver his opening remarks for the Singapore Pavilion. Ambassador, please.
Thank you. Wow, it's quite a crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and welcome to the launch of the Singapore Pavilion, COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan. Let me start with an inconvenient question. Is it too late? The question is pertinent because we have been coming to and saying at COP meetings for the last 20 years that time is running out, we need to act fast before it is too late. We've been saying that for about 20 years now. So is it too late? In one sense, yes. Climate change is already happening, and it will get worse in the coming decades, simply on account of the greenhouse gas emissions that have already occurred. And let's not forget that global greenhouse gas emissions are about 40% higher today than they were 20 years ago, and they are still rising. So it is inevitable that we must prepare for a climate-impaired world. But in another sense, it is not too late. A low-carbon world and a sustainable planet are still within reach, even if somewhat affected by climate change. If the world can achieve net zero emissions by 2050, we can avert catastrophic and irreversible climate change, and the planet can begin to heal gradually. Singapore will do its part to mitigate climate change. We are committed to achieve net zero emissions by 2050 and have been putting in place targets and plans towards that goal, sector by sector. But Singapore accounts for only 0.1% of global emissions. The more substantive way in which we aim to do our part is to work with our partners to facilitate Asia's decarbonization. As a global trade, transportation, and financial hub, Singapore is well placed to be a catalyst for global climate action, especially in Asia. Asia accounts for half of global greenhouse gas emissions, and it will be in Asia that the battle against climate change will be won or lost. The COP29 Singapore Pavilion will feature how Singapore is contributing to global climate action in two ways: striving towards a low-carbon world, and two, preparing for a climate-impaired world. And we need to do both things at the same time. First, a low-carbon world. Our focus will be on Asia. And let me highlight three areas where Singapore is leaning in. One, blended finance. Two, carbon markets, carbon credits. And three, grid infrastructure. Let me start with blended finance. Asia faces significant challenges in attracting private capital for decarbonization. cost of capital in Asia is about 2 to 3 times higher than in America and North America. What are the reasons? There's insufficient project development expertise, high upfront capital costs, long payback periods, regulatory, technological, and foreign exchange risks. So we need blended finance, a combination of concessional capital, technical assistance, and de-risking mechanisms, which together can help to catalyze private commercial capital. Concessional capital could be in the form of grants or financing at below market rates. By helping to absorb first loss, it improves project bankability, thereby attracting private commercial capital. Last year, the Monetary Authority of Singapore launched a blended finance initiative which aims to mobilize up to $5 billion to facilitate Asia's transition. It is called Financing Asia's Transition Partnership, or FASP for short. And as just announced by Minister Grace Fu, the Singapore government has pledged to contribute up to $500 million in concessional capital to FASP on a matching basis. This means that if FASP can attract an equal amount of concessional capital from other sources, we can build up a concessional capital pool of up to $1 billion, 500 million from the Singapore government, 500 matching from other partners. So who are these partners? The other sources of concessional capital could be sovereign governments, development finance institutions, multilateral development banks, and philanthropic foundations. This combined pool of concessional capital of $1 billion can then be used to crowd up to $4 billion of commercial capital to support transition projects in Asia. FASP comprises 3 programs aimed at 3 priority areas for Asia's transition. The Energy Transition Acceleration Finance, or ETAF, partnership will focus on the early phase-out of coal plants, grid infrastructure, and battery storage. Coal plants in Asia account for 1/3 of the continent's emissions. Most of them have about 30 years or more to run. ETAF will use financing to bring forward the retirement of these coal plants and substitute them with renewable energy. It will also invest in the upgrading of grid infrastructure to transmit the renewable energy to where the demand is, and also battery storage systems to cope with the intermittence of renewable energy. The Asian Development Bank, ADB, and the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet, GEAP, have joined us as strategic partners. And we are in discussions with Clifford Capital, which has extensive experience with infrastructure financing in Asia, to be the manager for ETAF. The next program, the Green Investment Partnership, or GIP. GIP will focus on renewable energy and storage, electric vehicles, transport, and water and waste management projects. GIP will identify such green infrastructure projects that are not readily supported by commercial lenders due to factors such as a lack of investor familiarity. GIP will use blended finance to help de-risk these projects to the point where they can start to access mainstream financing. In addition to the International Finance Corporation, the IFC, and Allied Climate Partners, ACP, others are considering their participation in GIP as capital providers. Pentagreen Capital, backed by Temasek Holdings and HSBC, is the manager for GIP. The third program, the Industrial Transformation Program, or ITP, will focus on hard-to-abate sectors like cement and steel, and technology solutions for decarbonization, like carbon removals. These are areas where Asia's ongoing urbanization and development have, unfortunately, been also a growing source of emissions. So ITP aims to identify and finance technology solutions that will help to decouple Asia's growth from emissions. and MAS is pleased to partner IFC and BlackRock to develop ITP. So since its launch, FASTB has achieved very good momentum, attracting reputable partners. A number of other partners are close to finalizing their investment due diligence to commit concessional capital, which will be matched by the Singapore government. And with this strong support, FASTB aims to commence commercial fundraising early next year and make its first investments by the next COP. MAS will share more details on Finance Day on 14th November. Let me move on to carbon credits. Carbon credits help to channel financing to decarbonization outcomes that would otherwise not have taken place. Carbon credits offer a way for companies and countries to meet their emissions targets after they have exhausted their current abatement potential. At the same time, the credits help to finance mitigation activities that can reduce or remove emissions, no matter where they are in the world. But there are significant hurdles to overcome before global carbon markets can scale. Demand signals from buyers are not clear. On the supply side, many project developers do not have the expertise to generate high-quality carbon credits. And most seriously, there is a lack of confidence in carbon markets due to gaps in accounting for the generation, the transfer, and use of these credits. The Singapore Pavilion will bring together ecosystem players from across the world to develop strategies to promote carbon markets. Now, we will highlight 4 initiatives that Singapore has been pursuing in partnership with others. First, Singapore has been supporting the demand side for carbon credits. As of this year, carbon tax liable companies in Singapore can offset up to 5% of their taxable emissions with high-quality carbon credits compliant with Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. Singapore has signed implementation agreements with Papua New Guinea and with Ghana to open up the supply of such credits. We're also working with Bhutan to sign an implementation agreement in the early part of 2025. Singapore companies are already looking to purchase credits under these agreements. And we look forward to furthering cooperation with partner countries to catalyze high-quality carbon credits. Second, Singapore is addressing the financing gap for carbon credit projects. The Singapore Economic Development Board, EDB, will be launching later today a new initiative to enable and catalyze project origination and development of Article 6 carbon credit projects. Third, Singapore is supporting the development of a harmonized carbon data platform to address transparency concerns. To ensure that credits are not double counted, we worked with the World Bank and the International Emissions Trading Association to launch Climate Action Data Trust, or CAT Trust. CAT Trust uses blockchain technology to link, aggregate, and harmonize data across carbon crediting registries to improve transparency, giving both buyers and sellers confidence that their credits are of high quality. To date, CAT Trust has grown to cover 85% of all credits issued globally, and we're working to expand its coverage even further. Fourth, Singapore is supporting the development of high-quality carbon credits to accelerate Asia's coal transition. MAS is piloting the concept of transition credits generated from the emissions reduced through retiring a coal plant earlier than planned and replacing it with cleaner energy sources. Given that many coal plants in Asia are young and have secured long-term revenues with power purchase agreements, the early phase-out of coal plants is inherently uneconomical. So transition credits offer a source of financing to cover the revenue foregone from retiring a coal plant early. Now, to develop transition credits as a viable solution, Singapore has brought together more than 30 ecosystem players to form the Transition Credits Coalition, or TRACTION for short. And TRACTION will release its interim report this week outlining the next steps for transition credits in 3 areas: integrity, scalability, and confidence in demand. To define the high integrity attributes that transition credits should have, Traction will draw on the existing guidance, taxonomies, and draft methodologies. Now, to make transition credits more scalable across markets, Traction will identify the key risks across the entire transition credit project cycle and put together potential mitigation solutions. Now, the solutions will have to go beyond conventional instruments and may include innovative carbon credit insurance and advanced market commitments. And to promote a robust pipeline of demand for transition credits, Traction will look into prospective buyers' motivations and requirements and identify how transition credits can be best positioned to meet the needs of different groups of buyers. In the next phase of his work, Traction will develop frameworks that can be applied across different markets, helping Asia transition away from coal plants in a credible manner. More details will be shared here on Finance Day on 14 November. Third key initiative we're leaning in for a low-carbon world, grid infrastructure. As they say, there is no transition without transmission. The biggest obstacle to the deployment of renewable energy in Southeast Asia is not the cost of renewables, which has been coming down dramatically, but it is the lack of robust grids to bring the renewable energy to where it is needed. It is not enough that we upgrade domestic grids. We must aim for interconnected grids across Asia. Multilateral grids are a win-win proposition. First, gains from trade. Multilateral grids enable energy trading across a larger network of countries, matching supply from countries with significant renewable potential with demand from other markets. Second, commercial viability. The expanded offtake enabled by a regional energy market helps to increase the bankability of renewable energy projects and thereby attract investments into these projects. Third, energy security. Multilateral grids provide an avenue for backup energy sources in case there are disruptions in bilateral grids. Singapore is strengthening partnerships to realize the vision of an ASEAN power grid. First, we will work with our ASEAN neighbors to develop a framework for regional subsea cables. Second, Singapore is collaborating with the US to study the legal and financing frameworks for energy connectivity in Southeast Asia. A working group comprising countries in the region and multilateral development institutions will be formed to advance the study. Third, we are working with like-minded partners to create a pilot framework to recognize renewable energy certificates associated with cross-border electricity trade. Now, such a framework will catalyze cross-border demand for green electrons and thereby facilitate investments in electricity trading projects. On Energy and Decarbonization Days on 15 November, the relevant stakeholders and experts will gather here to discuss cross-border collaboration for an integrated grid infrastructure across ASEAN. The second way in which Singapore is contributing to climate action is in preparing for a climate-impaired world. Let me highlight 3 areas of focus. First, we have been strengthening our water resilience. Extreme weather patterns brought about by climate change will place a strain on water resources in Singapore and in Southeast Asia. Now, we have been leveraging technology and pursuing innovative solutions to ensure that our water sources remain weather and climate resilient. We recycled used water using advanced membrane technologies and desalinated seawater as part of efforts to strengthen water security and make it more weather resilient. Second, we're building up our food resilience. Climate change can cause fluctuations in global food supply chains, and Singapore is particularly vulnerable as we import more than 90% of our food. So we're strengthening our food resilience by building the agri-food industry's capabilities to produce locally in a sustainable manner. We're also scaling up production in future foods, such as alternative proteins, which do not rely on the space-intensive practices of traditional animal farming. And third, we are tapping on nature-based solutions for climate change mitigation, adaptation, and biodiversity protection. The centerpiece of these nature-based solutions is Singapore's ongoing transformation into a city in nature, characterized by weaving nature into our city landscape and connecting green spaces through ecological corridors and park connectors. Being a city in nature has multiple benefits. For example, sky-rise greenery can reduce urban stormwater runoff by about 7% to 12%, trap air pollutants in the urban environment, reduce energy consumption needed for cooling, and insulate against machinery and traffic noise. On 20th and 21st November, we will feature programs on how governments, businesses, research institutes, and international organizations can work together to shape the low-carbon cities of the future, strengthen resource circularity, and accelerate the adoption of nature-based solutions in urban settings. To sum up, the Singapore Pavilion exemplifies the spirit of collaboration and collective action that are so critical to addressing the climate crisis. Be it in blended finance, carbon markets, grid connectivity, water and food resilience, or nature-based solutions. It is only by working together across the public and private sectors and across countries will we stand a chance to secure a sustainable planet. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. May I invite you to join me on stage here to launch the Singapore Pavilion. Ambassador will be joined by representatives from the Prime Minister's Office, Ministry of Sustainability and the Environment, and the Monetary Authority of Singapore. Deputy Secretary Amelia, Assistant Managing Director Gillian, Pavilion Chair Yuan Sheng, and Chief Negotiator Joseph, please. The theme of this year's Singapore Pavilion is Orchids and Our City in Nature. When they place their hands on the canister, the orchid inside will light up, signifying the lighting up and opening of the Singapore Pavilion. Everyone, on the count of 3 with me, okay? Are you ready?
Yes!
1, 2, 3! As mentioned earlier, the theme of the Singapore Pavilion this year is Orchids and Our City in Nature. If you look around our pavilion, you'll notice many beautiful orchid lattices. These orchids were 3D printed using upcycled metal wires such as copper, aluminium, and stainless steel to form ductile cores and then molded into a blooming centerpiece. Next up, let us play a video which will share more about our City in Nature vision as part of Singapore's broader Sustainable Development Blueprint, the Singapore Green Plan.
Climate change, an existential threat of our times. A crisis that waits for no one.
Our Singapore Green Plan 2030 is a whole-of-nation movement to advance Singapore's sustainable development. The Green Plan strengthens our commitments under the Paris Agreement and the UN 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. It also positions us to achieve our net zero emissions aspiration by 2050.
Our Green Plan charts ambitious and concrete targets over 5 key pillars. Climate change brings on new and long-term challenges to Singapore. So, we need to build a resilient future to tackle these risks. We are investing in climate research and studying how to fortify our coastlines against rising sea levels. To tackle soaring temperatures, we are designing effective heat mitigation strategies. We are safeguarding our water and food supply to ensure we will always have enough, despite changing weather conditions and supply disruptions. Here at home, we are growing more food locally, working with farms to expand their production capacities and capabilities in a climate-resilient way. Singapore's transformation into a city in nature never stops. We are building up our carbon sinks by extending greenery throughout our island. While safeguarding our core green spaces, we're also making parks more accessible to everyone. As we intensify greening across Singapore, we bring nature and our rich biodiversity closer to us, ultimately creating a green, livable, and sustainable home for all Singaporeans. Small actions can create a big impact. Today, we're living more sustainably to leave behind a smaller carbon footprint, while also cultivating greener habits and mindsets for our next generation. In schools, sustainability is integrated into our curriculum, campus, culture, and community to nurture our students as stewards of the environment. By pursuing a circular economy, we reuse and recycle precious resources so that nothing goes to waste. The extended producer responsibility for e-waste and packaging waste is an important next step in achieving sustainable living. Walking, cycling, and taking public transport are the most eco-friendly ways to travel. So we will continue to expand our public transport network with more cycling paths to make our commutes even greener. Singapore is making decisive moves towards cleaner energy sources and building more energy-efficient infrastructure. Our city will be connected by greener public transport. Electric vehicles will power every move on our roads, and our air and sea hubs will also run on cleaner energy. A sustainable future starts with rethinking how we power our country. We are greening new and existing buildings while working with occupants to optimize their energy consumption. Solar is our most viable clean energy option, and we are maximizing it where we can, from building rooftops to reservoirs and other open spaces. We are also working with partners to develop regional power grids, as well as low-carbon alternatives like hydrogen to decarbonize our energy sources and enhance our energy security. Singapore is transitioning to a greener and more sustainable economy. The journey of decarbonization has already begun, and we are helping our enterprises to adopt sustainable practices while seizing new jobs and growth opportunities in the green economy. The carbon tax introduced in 2019 is an important step in this transition. Singapore is committed to supporting our industries, enterprises, and workers to harness sustainability as a competitive advantage. We are also developing cross-border partnerships through green economy agreements with various countries. The 5 Green Plan pillars are supported by 2 enablers: a green government and a green citizenry. Our public sector is leading the way to decarbonize operations and embed sustainability in our core business, while partnering and empowering communities to take action today.
As a global community, we are all in this together. The path to a better world starts with you and me. We can all play our part and live sustainably today. Let's forge a better and greener Singapore together.
Unfortunately, Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Bhutan, His Excellency Tshering Topgay, is unable to make it for this event due to unforeseen circumstances. He sent his regards. Next, we will proceed with the keynote panel on building the global architecture for carbon markets. This panel brings together speakers to discuss challenges in building trusted global carbon markets and share learnings and initiatives to unlock high-quality supply, establish responsible demand, and build robust market infrastructure to scale carbon markets. May I invite Ms. Gillian Tan, Assistant Managing Director and Chief Sustainability Officer at the Monetary Authority of Singapore, up on stage. Gillian leads the Sustainability Group in MAS that oversees strategy development and coordination across MAS's various sustainability initiatives. She will be our moderator for today's panel discussion. Ms. Gillian Tan, please.
Okay, I think they're looking to me to start this off. Every COP at the Singapore Pavilion, we are very, very privileged to have what I call a star panel. And this year is no exception, but they like to keep things interesting for me because this year, only half of my star panel is currently with us. But that's what we do in Singapore. We roll with the punches, don't we? And with that, let me take the opportunity to invite one of my panelists, half of the stars, and that is Ravi Menon, of course, Ambassador for Climate Action and Senior Advisor to the National Climate Change Secretariat, Singapore. Let's welcome Ravi on stage. So this is a first for us, Ravi. I think last year we started with a full panel, and then I think Mark Carney had to step off. This year it's just you and me to start, which was not part of the script. But, let's get started, and I might, with everyone's indulgence, repeat some of these points to set the context when Ajay does arrive. So Ravi, as we know, Saved by the Bell. Yeah, good to see you. Good to see you. Thank you, Ajay. I was struggling with the riffing, so, we really...
Yeah, sorry about that. Getting through this process took time. My apologies.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
So we're very glad to welcome you to the Singapore Pavilion.
Yeah.
I was just sharing with everyone that every year at COP, at the Singapore Pavilion, we're privileged to have what I like to call a star panel. And, this year we have you and Ravi, and I think there are no greater stars on the global climate finance stage than these two gentlemen. So we have Ajay Banga, President of the World Bank Group, and Ravi Menon, Ambassador for Climate Action and Senior Advisor to the National Climate Change Secretariat of Singapore.
And my former regulator. So I'm very respectful of Ravi.
Yeah. And my former boss, so you and I are in the same camp.
Exactly.
So, Ajay and Ravi, the COP29 presidency has made Article 6 a key priority for us, and this really enables the developing world to tap on carbon markets for climate finance and climate action. Yesterday, we saw the milestone approval of the Article 6.4 principles, so, a very important step. But I think looking beyond Article 6, we all know that there are many challenges in the carbon markets that remain. I think the challenges are well known, but we'll spend some time talking about it. But let's just get right into it with some figures. 3 figures, 9.2, 5.7, and 3.5. So 9.2 trillion US dollars is the investment that is needed annually to achieve net zero by 2050. 5.7 trillion is what we invest today, and 3.5 trillion is the gap in financing that we see each year. 3.5 trillion. How much of this gap can carbon markets potentially cover? I've seen estimates saying that there's a potential annual value of 1 trillion thereabouts. So there's some quite steep assumptions here, but the takeaway really is that carbon markets could potentially plug a large gap in that financing gap, maybe up to 1/3. But at the same time, we seem to be quite far from realizing the benefits that carbon markets can bring. So the key question, ladies and gentlemen, that we hope to get to grips with in this panel is how we can concretely take steps forward and build a global architecture for well-functioning and trusted carbon markets. So Ajay, maybe I'll start with you. Before we jump into the how, maybe we'll start with the why. Can you remind us, why do we need carbon markets and what objectives do they serve?
So thank you for having me. And I don't know how I ended up going before Ravi, but I will. I think more important than the absolute dollar value of that money, because that can boggle your mind, and perfection is the enemy of the possible. So I'd be careful not to always worry about how much more money needs to be raised as compared to doing all we can to increase the thinking and the resources that are coming to this place. That's the way I think about this, as let's keep going forward as compared to getting worried about where the end journey is, because I don't think we actually know where the end journey is yet. So what am I focused on is, if you want to change human behavior, then you have to find a way to incentivize it. The reality is that people are trying to cater for their families. That's what makes them cut down a tree or cut down a mangrove and replace it with crops or something else. They're not doing it out of spite for nature. They're doing it because that's kind of what they need to cater for their families. Somebody else is doing it for other reasons as well. Most of it comes back to economics. What we need is to find a way to get money to move voluntarily, ideally, from the developed world to these countries in the developing world, where if they were to make an effort to enable all of us to benefit from their actions, a global public good means that their efforts will benefit all of us, then in turn we should be able to be willing to put money to work on it. But making that money go voluntarily is what this is about. If you can create voluntary carbon markets that are trustworthy and reliable, then the why is the flow of money that will come. As I said in another panel some months ago, maybe a year ago, expecting someone to be taxed to send the money from a country to another country they don't know of and think that's going to work out well politically is not a good expectation. Voluntarily is the way to keep pushing this. Now, we can't get that without many other steps that Ravi is much better at speaking to than I am. But that's my reason of the why. We need to change economic behavior. We need to make sure the money reaches the community so that they feel incented to do things differently. So we need to do it in a transparent, reliable way that goes all the way to the communities.
No, thanks very much, Ajay. And I know the World Bank has always focused on market-based mechanisms for some of these moves. And I like what you said about incentivizing, because that's the only way forward. Ravi, I don't know if you want to speak briefly on why carbon markets has played such an important feature in your work as Climate Action Ambassador.
Well, I think Ajay has put it so well. And just to add, Gillian, that what the World Bank does well is not just use market-based mechanisms to bring about desired outcomes, but to do them in an inclusive way. And that came across again. You know, we need to understand that we need to bring people along as we make this transition. And the same it applies to carbon credits as it applies to everything else we do in sustainability. And credits in particular have such a win-win proposition, because there are people who demand, countries and companies who want to meet targets, who have residual emissions hard to abate, and they are willing to buy these credits. And by making that financing available, they are making possible things that would not have otherwise occurred in the global south, where actually many projects are struggling. So I think carbon credits play a vital role. I don't see a pathway to net zero without carbon markets and carbon credits. They are absolutely critical. But they have a bad rap today, and I'm sure we'll get into some of that later on. But I just thought, let's not let not the perfect be the enemy of the good, that this financing mechanism is absolutely critical for where we want to get to.
Thanks, Ravi. I mean, that's a bold statement. No pathway to net zero without carbon markets, carbon credits. And I think that really focuses our mind for this particular panel. So let's swiftly move on then to the how. So we want to unpack the issues that we've been facing, all of us, in scaling the carbon market. What are the key hurdles today? What are we solving for? What do we need to resolve? Maybe Ravi, I'll start with Ravi this time, yeah? Ravi, can we start with you?
I'm good at saying problems. Ajay will give the solutions.
Let me start. I'd love.
Well, we follow the moderators, so here goes. Many problems. This market is in a, let's be honest, it's in a bad state today. Prices have plummeted, transaction volumes have plummeted, and more importantly, there's a trust deficit in these markets. But what is encouraging is also in the last 6 to 8 months or 12 months, there's also been renewed discussions among those of us like Ajay and myself and many others who believe that carbon markets are critical. We need to resuscitate. We need to do something. So what are the problems? First, we have a problem on the demand side. There is considerable uncertainty about the circumstances in which you can actually purchase carbon credits. Corporates especially face this. Many corporates are keen to buy them, but they face a great deal of uncertainty how they will be judged if they were to buy them. Now, there's a lacuna here. We have well-meaning standard-setting bodies, SBTi, VCMI, and so on, who have come out with some form of guidance. But the guidance is not complete. It doesn't cover Scope 3 emissions. It doesn't spell out what are residual emissions. And so with the general bad rap that carbon markets have been having, corporates are hesitant to do this. We need to break this cycle. We need to work with these standard-setting bodies to make sure that they are robust, but also practical guidance. Governments, I think, need to step in to play a more active role. There are early discussions among some governments whether governments should provide some form of guidance, some form of comfort. And I think multilateral development institutions also have a role to play so that people don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. If they come in to add credibility and credence to the voices out there to say, these are the circumstances under which corporates can buy credits, then I think we can go quite some way. So I think that is the first problem you need to solve. The second, on the supply side, there are considerable questions about the integrity of some of these carbon credits. When The Guardian comes out to say that 90% of forestry credits are worthless. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but we do know there has been quite a bit of abuse in these markets. Some of these credits are double counted, some of them are worthless, some of them have leakage problems, and this has undermined confidence. So we need to work extra hard on the supply side to ensure the credits are of high quality. The third is gaps in market infrastructure. Ajay will probably agree with this. We both come from a finance background, and we know how financial markets work. And when we look at the carbon markets, I'm just bewildered. There is no central record keeping. The transfer of credits is not tracked. The exhaustion of credits is not tracked. You don't have the equivalent that you have in financial markets in these carbon markets. It's a very ad hoc kind of infrastructure. So we need to build strong market infrastructure that will give buyers and sellers confidence they're dealing with an asset. And that's what a carbon credit is. It is an asset. They're dealing with an asset, and ownership and transfer mechanisms need to be transparent and clear. So we have a whole range of demand, supply, market infrastructure related issues. And the last one is capacity building. Many project developers involved in carbon projects don't have sufficient expertise to integrate carbon credits into their plans. And so you're not generating good quality credits that ultimately will have a demand. So you need to address capacity building also. Again, the solutions quite a few of that will lie here because they are the champions. Their core competency is capacity building, and we need to do more on that front as well. So some of these impediments.
No, that's great. Thanks, Ravi. And sticking for the moment, Ajay, if I can ask you to do that on the hurdles rather than jumping into solutions, because we do want to hear you on this. The World Bank, I understand, recently put out its roadmap for for carbon markets infrastructure. So that was a very useful sort of document for us. And, Ravi spoke about market infrastructure challenges, which I think are very real as well. So maybe with that and looking broader as well, what are the key hurdles that are top of mind for you as you think about it?
I think Ravi's covered all. I like the way he's categorized the four of supply, demand, infrastructure, and capacity. I think that's the right way to think about it. Look, at the end of the day, what's happened is that this market had just begun to move, and we'd reached a $2 billion transaction volume 3-4 years ago. It's crashed to 700 million. Per ton, the recovery is much lower today. And the reason that's happened is principally because of all these reasons, starting from a few bad apples in the system to inadequate regulatory clarity, which is one of the things that we're trying to work out in this COP, is to get regulatory clarity, to the issue of record keeping and transparency of these markets, all the way to the capacity of these countries to count their credits correctly. So we've got all these problems. I described it to someone the other day. Think of gold, because people don't understand carbon credits, right? Think of gold. If gold did not have a standard or definition called a carat of gold, you know what that is. Everybody knows that is 14 carat, 22 carat, 18 carat. Whatever you're wearing, there's a definition for it, and then there's a price per carat. And if you go up in the category, you get a different price. Everything is transparent. Everybody knows. There are standard-setting bodies. Things are measured in a standard way. Therefore, if he and I exchange a piece of gold, we know there's a value attached to it. If we're doing it as a gold spider fund or a gold digitized asset, there's a stock exchange, there's a place that records that transaction has happened and it's gone from me to him and I can't sell it a second time. You see what I mean? If the gold market was built that way many, many years ago, we better get the same logic to the carbon credit market. That's all Ravi's trying to describe. He's trying to describe the standards and quality and implementation of that kind of a market for carbon credits. And I think he's absolutely correct.
But we've done it before, right, Rajay?
In gold.
Exactly. Gold and many other asset classes.
Yes, absolutely.
Some of which are much more complex. You know,
Yeah.
I'm thinking of like derivatives and all the rest. So why has it been so difficult for us to get that clarity of standards and
We just haven't got regulatory clarity. I mean, look, the World Bank set up a sort of a carbon infrastructure roadmap group, a working group. Those guys have been meeting and discussing this. Getting agreement across different categories of credits has not been easy. I just think we're at early stages. If we get things defined here in Article 6, beyond the approval that you saw yesterday, really getting it to a full agreement, I think that would make a big difference in establishing how things can work. Because once people have clarity on that, you'll get a much better space for the voluntary carbon markets as well.
No, thanks. And I think that's precisely why the World Bank's work is so critical. Because, the bottlenecks, I think, that your work group has identified include this lack of clarity in ecosystem governance structures.
Correct. But we can't do it by ourselves. We're not experts in the whole thing. We can be helpful. But what we are doing is creating the convening power of bringing together all the players in the different parts of this, regulators, standard setters, other people, into one room so we can sort things out. That we can help with. But we can't be the arbiter of the whole thing by ourselves. I want to be clear on that. Huh?
So put out guidance notes, convene the stakeholders, reflect what you're hearing from stakeholders and put it out. No, excellent. All right, so I think I slipped into the trap that I didn't want these gentlemen to go down, which was to go into solutions. So
let's solution-oriented guys.
I know, exactly. So let's, since we all like solutions, let's spend the rest of our time on that, really. I'd love to hear how Singapore and the World Bank, respectively, are addressing some of these challenges that we just talked about, and what solutions, do we and the whole community that's gathered here today, what do we need to focus on for carbon markets to work? Maybe Ajay, I'll give you the first word on this.
So I think it's not just Singapore and the World Bank separately, it's also what we can do together. I'm going to leave, when I finish, that's the thought I'm going to leave, because that to me is an even more important topic. So first of all, on the topic of creating transparent, reliable carbon credits that can be counted properly and managed properly, we committed at COP28 that we would, by 2028, collect 15 countries where we'll be doing forestry projects that we're involved with. So it has to be projects we're involved with to start with, and I'll explain why. We will be willing to do both an environmental audit and a societal audit of the credits. The environmental audit ensures that these credits are permanent, that they're real, and they're transparent, and that you aren't cutting a tree down here to plant a tree here. Right? So within the jurisdiction of that audit, we can show that it's a clean extra credit. The societal audit makes sure that the money that is raised from selling that credit, that an overwhelming majority of that money actually reaches that community so they benefit economically from the work they're doing, so they are not incented to go back to what they were doing earlier the moment you turn your back, right? So those two things we can do, and we have people who have done this and are capable of doing it in these countries. These 15 countries are signed up. In the first year, we've only generated 5 million surplus credits from this. We have a desire to get to 125 million by 2028. That gives us 4 years to get it done. So we've got work to do. And there are people in this room right now, sitting here, and standing there, who are very focused on trying to get to those 125 million credits. But this to me is tangible. We can do it. Why forestry projects we are involved with? Because we can do the two audits. If you ask me to do this on projects where we aren't directly involved, it gets a little squishier and it gets a little harder because that's not what our core expertise is. And the last thing we need is people certifying stuff where that's not their core expertise. That's what got us here in the first place. So let's not rush to do the wrong thing and think we'll get a different answer. That's the definition of insanity, doing the same thing and expecting a different answer, right? So that's the first piece. The second piece is the transparency of the transaction. What Ravi just talked about was knowing that you can't double sell, you can't if something is accounted for, it's accounted clearly. There, I think we can really work together. There are a number of registries being set up, and one of the things that Ravi and Singapore are very keen on doing, which we really want to work closely with them, is to help create one global registry, connecting these different ones. And I think Ravi can talk about that in great depth. But if we can do that together, then I think we can help eliminate one of the problems that exists in the system. So along with those audits and certifying the sort of seal of good housekeeping on the credits, if we can also create this kind of effort, that would be good. We're also launching a guarantee out of MEGA, which really is aimed at, hey, if a country changes its mind about the credits. So as you know, let's say you generate these credits, and I've got extra credits, which I think right now are beyond my NDCs. But then as a country, I decide to use them for my NDCs. And now I pass a law and turn things backward. Where does that leave the companies or the people who bought those credits? So if MEGA can issue a guarantee, like a political risk guarantee of that type, then we can be helpful in 3 different ways. Certify the credit, help to set up common registries, but also create a political risk guarantee of some type to ensure that there is confidence in the floor of the quality of that credit.
No, I think that's so critical. Actually, your last point, Ajay, when we surveyed the sort of risk landscape with transition credits, we realized that there's a whole variety of risks that project developers and buyers and sellers are concerned about. So, political risks, definitely, and that's where I think the World Bank, MEGA, can step forward. We also need, I suspect, more private sector solutions, insurance solutions like carbon credit invalidation solutions and so on.
Well, I mean, remember, MEGA operates by laying off its risk into the private reinsurance market. So the fact that MEGA can do this is bringing private capital automatically in. I believe without private capital, I mean, Ravi believes this even more passionately than I do. Singapore is the home of understanding the role of private capital with the right government enablement. That is the ultimate model for this. We need government enablement, we need governance enablement, but we need private capital to come. Otherwise, those trillions you started with, there isn't enough money in government coffers, even in Singapore, or in the World Bank's coffers to make this happen. So I think you're on an important topic there.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ajay. Ravi, we're still on solutioning, right? So I think Ajay's given us a very good overview of some of the mechanisms that need to be in place. When you think about the solutions that we need, what are some of the top of mind ones that are most critical?
Well, it would be to address the 4 issues that I highlighted. And like Ajay mentioned, no single party can provide comprehensive solutions. Even the World Bank, they can convene, they can give thought leadership, but you need collectively governments, regulators, and stakeholders to decide what is best. Singapore, even more so. I mean, we're a small country. But what I would say is that we can't wait for the conditions to get perfect before we start moving. we live in an imperfect world. We got to start doing things, and we got to start experimenting and innovating. So I'll give a few examples. On the demand side, so Singapore, as you know, has been active in doing a small part to generate demand for high-quality Article 6 credits. Implementation agreements with Papua New Guinea, Ghana, we're discussing with Bhutan, a few others. Now, how do you ensure these are high quality? We don't have a solid market infrastructure in the voluntary carbon markets. These are voluntary carbon credits. We want to make sure they're Article 6 compliant. So what we do is we work with we rely on the crediting methodologies developed by Vera and Gold Standard. We use that to ensure that the credits we purchase are of high quality. So we're not waiting for a perfect infrastructure to be in place. We lend a little bit of our reputation because we do good due diligence, and we work with reputable partners like Vera and Gold Standard, use their crediting methodologies, and do this. And so you ensure that the credits, when they are transferred, don't even get transferred across countries. They are transferred to the registry, debits and credits, and cancels or exhausts. So this is the world we want to move to, and so we do it in small steps. And we're now discussing with them, Vera and Gold Standard, how can we formalize this into a protocol that other countries who want to do the same can also ride on. They don't have to reinvent the wheel. All this while, the global community tries to get its act together to build a more permanent kind of infrastructure to govern the voluntary markets. The other thing is, by doing what I just described, we are, in a sense, bringing together the compliance and voluntary carbon markets, credits. That is important, because you can't have this fragmentation. The only distinction is compensating adjustments. But in other regards, a credit in the compliance market and the voluntary market must have the same high quality and integrity and the same infrastructure to govern them, right? So this is one of the things that we're doing. On the supply side, again, there are good standards out there. ICBCM has been active in this space, and you have a variety of bodies doing this. Two areas where I think Asia needs to pay a lot of attention are the credits that go with the early retirement of coal and the credits that go with nature-based solutions. Forestry credits, which the World Bank has very rightly focused on, because coal and deforestation are the two biggest sources of emissions in Asia. You need to solve this, and you need carbon credits to solve it. So coal phase-out, I just mentioned in the remarks earlier on, the early retirement of coal plants leads to an actual reduction in emissions, and credits must be generated, especially if those coal plants have 30-year power purchase agreements, and bringing it forward by 15 years means this is actual saving of emissions that you're not putting into the atmosphere. Credits must be generated for that to make it economically feasible. Why would the plant owner shut down the plant 15 years earlier and lose all their revenue? So the work that we're doing on transition credits is critically important. We also need to do good work on the quality of nature-based solutions. And here we're working closely with the World Bank on this. We're very happy the World Bank is leading this effort, forestry credits. Southeast Asia, the Congo Basin, and Amazon forests are the three big carbon sinks in the world. And in this part of the world, a lot more needs to be done in preserving our forests and reforesting. And we need credible voices and players in this space. So forestry credits and getting the integrity of forestry credits correct is very important. I should add, Singapore has just put out a request for proposal to buy nature-based credits. So we are entering this market. We want to learn about these credits, make sure they're high integrity, and use that towards our NDCs. And we hope by doing these small actions, we are sending signals from the demand side and the supply side that we're addressing it. On infrastructure, there are a whole range of issues. Ajay very usefully mentioned the registry issue, which is so foundational. I can't imagine a stock market without a central depository or a registry. But this market seems to have, hundreds of registries all over the place, multiple registries, not hundreds, maybe dozens. Now, we can't wish away the registries and, hope for one unified global registry. But what we can do is to have an umbrella of a registry that connects to existing registries, ensure integrity, ensure that proper record keeping is done, and by doing that, we ensure a certain degree of transparency. And this is a project that Singapore has worked with the World Bank with the World Bank lending very strong support to make this happen. And the Carbon Action Data Trust, or CAT Trust, today connects many registries, and it covers 85% of the credits transacted globally today. So we're getting close to something that is of a unified nature. Now, this gives confidence. It uses blockchain technology because that's very useful for aggregation and for ensuring that everything is on a common platform where there is no double counting, which is one of the critical problems we're trying to solve. There are other infrastructure regulation issues where I think the discussions are still quite nascent. The elephant in the room: should these markets be regulated? If it's left as they are, and we've seen all the downsides that go with it, because where there is money to be made, there will always be abuses. I mean, that's human nature. But again, how do you regulate this intelligently in a way that doesn't kill the market, that doesn't overburden it with requirements of all sorts? This is something that regulators are grappling with. And second, enforcement against deceitful actions. That's something else we need to think about. So governments and regulators, again, with the convening power of the World Bank, coming together to see what are the small steps we can take towards market infrastructure that is fairly regulated, or smartly regulated, with a view to ensure confidence in the market. I think that is one of the other questions that we need to address.
So actually, both of you have given us lots to do. Lots and lots to do. And, this is a dutiful, responsible crowd. If I give you each 60 seconds, what is the one key area where you hope to see progress in 2025? And I'll let Ravi go first on this. One area, Ravi, please don't give us a long list.
I think you should let age go before beauty. Oh. Yeah. Come on.
In the carbon market space, one area that will be critical is for players in the advanced economies to adopt a more practical and open attitude towards carbon credits. I think we are seeing a lot of pushback against credits in Europe, and for quite understandable reasons. And this notion that you should not buy credits until you have reduced your emissions all the way down doesn't quite square. Because if you've reduced emissions all the way down, then what's the need for credits? It's to open up that possibility that even if you can't abate all your emissions, you should be open to buying credits because the global south needs it. It's not enough that Europe and America get to net zero. Asia, Latin America, and Africa need to get zero because otherwise we're going to be ending up in a climate impaired world. So I hope attitudes towards carbon credits become more open, more constructive, and work with the likes of the World Bank and others in Singapore to make this market work.
Absolutely. Ajay?
So, in addition to the idea of a transition in the carbon credits markets, which is what he's referring to, I think the other thing that would be very useful would be to get regulations clarified in things like what we're doing here. If we get things like Article 6 signed off on, we get the fundamentals laid properly, building on top of those fundamentals will make the lives of a lot of people much more possible and realistic to get done. So I would add those two things are what we'd probably like.
Thank you both so much. Let me try and sum this up in my usual way. I think, all that you said can be summed up in 5 M's. The first M, wait for it first, I may not make it, but the first M is market, right? So, the importance of market infrastructure, standards, clarity of roles for intermediaries and so on. So market. The second M is really around mechanisms, and Ajay, you spoke to this. Audit, the role of transparency, guarantees, and indeed regulation, and the need for that to step forward much more decisively. The third M is messiness, and that came up a few times, right? We shouldn't be waiting for perfection, for that perfect roadmap. Let's just get to it. It's messy, but we can do it. The fourth M is multiple, and here we want multiple stakeholders, multiple parties, but not multiple standards to come forward, because we can't do this alone. Neither the Singapore government nor indeed the World Bank, powerful as it is, can do this alone. We need everyone to step up. And the final M was contributed by Ravi, and that's mindset. We absolutely need to change our attitudes and mindsets about carbon markets, carbon credits, and how they can be viable financing mechanisms. So 5 M's: market, mechanisms, messiness, multiple parties, and mindset. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Ravi and Ajay.
Gillian should have mentioned those at the start, would have saved us a lot of time.
Thank you all for the insightful panel discussion. Please join me in giving all our speakers another big round of applause. May I please invite our panelists and Ms. Gillian Tan to remain on stage for a group photo. Also, the Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Bhutan, His Excellency Chairing Topgay, is here with us. May I invite Prime Minister to join us on stage for the photo, please.
I'll join you.
Thank you once again to all our speakers. Next, let us invite Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Bhutan, His Excellency Chairing Topgay, to deliver his keynote speech. Prime Minister, please.
I don't think after a wonderful discussion, you're ready for a keynote speech. Messiness. Okay. So I was supposed to be here at 11, and then our host summoned us, the heads of government and states, for a family portrait. So I went with the flow. We were ushered in there. And I know that this is very important for me, for my country, for the world at large. And therefore, as soon as the family portrait was done, we rushed here. I went with the flow. And the message I got to myself, the lesson I learned, is that when it comes to fighting climate change, you do not go with the flow. You take matters into your own hands. I rushed here with a sense of urgency, and I felt good. I was walking at a brisk pace. I would have run, but everybody would have thought I'm crazy in this outfit running. So as quickly as I could, I got here. I seized the moment with a sense of urgency, and that is what is required to fight climate change. Bhutan is a small country. Our entire GDP is barely 2.5 billion US dollars. But 70% of our country is under forest cover, 50% of our country is protected as wildlife sanctuaries and nature reserves. As a result, we are rich in natural assets. Some say that our natural assets are valued more than $15 billion. Remember, our GDP is only $2.5 billion. We have no way of encashing in the value of our natural assets. We don't want to encash the value of our natural assets. We also have significant amounts of carbon credits because we sequester 3 times more carbon than we emit, plus 70% of the green renewable hydropower that we generate is exported to the region, offsetting carbon there. So if we could be paid fair value for our carbon credits, that would be enough. But let me tell you something, this is not for Bhutan. It is for the world. Because if a small country like Bhutan cannot trade our carbon credits, cannot participate in the carbon market, cannot get paid fair price for its good behavior, who in this planet is going to follow our good behavior? No one. The richer actors, the industrialized world, say they want to buy carbon credits. But they also say that they do not trust the quality of the supply. They do not trust the quality of the carbon credits. And so they don't buy carbon credits. They say that we need to buy carbon credits to offset our carbon emissions for the sake of our future. But they say that whenever we buy carbon credits, we are accused of greenwashing, and therefore it's better to stay in the status quo. So what this means is that we don't have a market. We don't have a place to sell our carbon. Now let me re-emphasize, this is not about Bhutan. This is about the rest of the world. If the incentives to sequester carbon, to reduce emissions, to trade, to produce carbon credits are not there, who in their right minds is going to invest in that direction? Therefore, creating a marketplace to trade in carbon that has been verified, certified, is very important. The Kyoto Protocol and the CDM, the Clean Development Mechanism, was all about that. Look where it is now. It has collapsed. Now we are frantically negotiating Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. I think of it as a lifeline. Article 6 of the Paris Agreement as a lifeline. If we can't reach a negotiated settlement in this COP, we can forget Article 6 also. And then all the finger pointing will continue until the next COP and the next COP. So I'm delighted to be here. Ambassador Ravi Menon of Singapore, I want to thank the government of Singapore. They're also rushing, going with the flow. So I want to thank the government of Singapore. Please convey my thanks for working with Bhutan under Article 6 that allows us to negotiate bilaterally. I want to thank the World Bank. Mr. Ajay Bangas also had to go with the flow. And I want to thank the World Bank for helping Bhutan develop a digital ecosystem to identify our carbon credits, to verify them, and to ensure complete transparency. And then I want to thank the World Bank and the government of Singapore and associated agencies for developing the Climate Action Data Trust. Our national registry has been uploaded into the Climate Action, thank you, Climate Action Data Trust. And this will allow our carbon credits not just visibility, but will allow the buyers to understand that this is transparent and give them a sense of confidence in what they're doing. So, my key message is, we've lost the Kyoto Agreement, we've lost CDM, we are still negotiating Article 6. Let's make it succeed. And Article 6, whether it succeeds or not, let us develop a vibrant marketplace. A vibrant, honest marketplace that may be messy. Let's start, even though it's messy, and let's involve multiple stakeholders and actors in this marketplace. Then there will be a true demand for carbon credits. We are ready to sell. And if we are rewarded, the rest of the world, particularly developing countries, will take part in the carbon market for the simple reason that our incentives will align. And remember that our biggest collective incentive has to be the survival of us as a human species that we hand over to our next generation a better planet than what we have inherited. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prime Minister. And with that, we conclude our Pavilion launch event, and thank you everyone for joining us. The next session will start at 1 p.m. on catalyzing finance for climate solutions, how can carbon markets help, followed by an exciting program by Gen Zero at 3 p.m. on Article 6 in focus, how do we move forward. To end off this exciting day, we will have a panel discussion on the challenges and opportunities of Article 6 cooperation at 5:20 p.m. We warmly invite you to join us for the rest of the day and look forward to seeing you again over the next 2 weeks. Thank you.
Great job. Thank you so much. You're awesome.
Thanks for